and welcome to the debate. I'm your host, Sana Maqbool, with you at PTV WORLD. In today's show, we will be talking about two very important stories of Pakistan and something which represent some of the biggest challenges that Pakistan is currently facing. One, of course, is with reference to the economic situation of the country, something that we have talked about in previous shows as well, because the situation keeps on deteriorating. And we still see that there is a lot of indecision on what exactly needs to be done about different measures that need to be taken, particularly the fuel subsidies with reference to the IMF program. And then we also see that there is increasingly a dip that has been seen in the stock market, and the dollar keeps on increasing as well, and it has reached its all-time high of 193 against the rupee. And this, of course, points towards a direction which is not in the favor of the country. And there has been a lot of talk about how there needs to be some sort of decision and announcement coming in from the government as well to making sure that the situation actually stabilizes. But there are still concerns whether or not that's going to happen anytime soon, because the government, of course, has concerns of its popularity as well with reference to fuel prices and electricity prices. And then we also see that the IMF program is dependent on that. At the same time, we have not heard about the package that was expected from Saudi Arabia as well, or the rollout of the Chinese loan as well. And a lot of these decisions, of course, are pointing towards an uncertainty which is not in favor of the economy. So what needs to be done with regards to that, and what decisions are there for the government, and what is going to happen in terms of the budget? We're going to be talking about all of that in our first segment. The second also points towards another grave crisis the country is currently facing. There have been, of course, reports about water scarcity in the country for a long time now. The UN report also points towards scarcity in Pakistan by 2025. And we also know that there is a lot of problems with regards to drought-like conditions, particularly in Sindh as well. And we've seen a lot of the barrages have also dried up in the past. This is something that is affecting livestock as well as crop yields. And then, of course, the supply of water to different agricultural lands as well, which then again affects our economic situation. The Minister for Water Resources, Khurshid Shah, has spoken about how this is also with reference to India stopping water against the Indus Water Treaty within Pakistan. He's talked about how the water shortage will be overcome within a week, but said this is, of course, a matter of concern for Pakistan. So we'll take a look at that as well, and what needs to be done with reference to the water crisis in the country. For this as more, and we've always been joined, as usual, by Farrukh Pitafi and Raja Faisal in the studios. And for our first segment, I've been joined online by Ali Salman, who's the Executive Director at Prime Institute. We've also been joined by Rana Ehsan, who's a leader of the PMLN. Thank you very much for joining us and being a part of the debate. I'll start with you, Mr. Rana. When we look at what has been going on with regards to the economic situation in the country, this, of course, has been something that was of major concern even prior to the government taking control. And we know this is something that is the reason why the previous government also came under a lot of criticism. A lot of people in Pakistan have been suffering due to increase in prices. And now we see that the deterioration in the stock market, the dollar prices, and the economic situation with reference to the IMF packages or other packages expected from countries like Saudi Arabia does not seem to improve. And understandably, the government is in a tough spot right now. But what is going to be the immediate decision making in terms of what is happening right now? Because there's, of course, concern of the uncertainty looming for such a long time that the situation keeps on getting worse. So are we expecting a measure taken by the government soon in terms of a decision? Because there's a lot of talk, but we don't know what's going to happen.
And Rana Sahab, last time you were here in this program, you said that the government will have to take tough decisions. You haven't taken any decisions so far. Why is that?
So I'll start with how we've come here. So in August 21, the net foreign reserves of this country, the state bank, were at almost 20 billion US dollars. And when we took over on 8th April, the state bank stated that the reserves were at 10.8 billion. Why was that so? It was so that the current account deficit is almost 40 billion US dollars for the first 10 months. The trade deficit has reached almost 40 billion US dollars. And we were in a program with IMF. The previous government brought about a mini budget in January, and they added an additional burden of 350 billion taxes, and they committed to increase the electricity prices and the petroleum levy and sale tax, the petroleum levy by 30 rupees. And it was going that way. But then suddenly in February, they decided that they're going to give a subsidy of 300 billion, plus they're going to freeze the petroleum prices and reduce electricity prices. So that sabotaged the talks with the IMF. Then secondly, the fiscal deficit of the country was budgeted at 4,000 billion rupees. And we've come to know now that it is heading towards almost 5,600 billion rupees. That's an addition of 1,600 billion rupees. So that is the scenario where we are. And obviously, the reason why the dollar is climbing and rupee is falling is that we are short. We are short of dollars, and we were standing with an import cover of almost 1.5 months. What is the way forward? The way forward is
why
that
haven't you removed the subsidies on oil prices and oil products?
So the challenge to the new government and Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif was that a political narrative being built by the now opposition, challenging and bringing in political instability, plus adding this burden of increased petroleum prices on the people of Pakistan, who are already shattered with high inflation versus shortage of dollars and the instability on the macroeconomic front. So
Right.
up till now, we've had a meeting
Rana
with
Sahab, does this mean that we're going to be seeing that sometime soon now? Is that decision going to be taken soon?
That's what I'm saying. So up till now, we've had the finance minister has gone to the United States and met with the IMF, and we have been to Saudi Arabia and UAE. And now I feel that the time has come that we will soon take a decision on the petroleum prices. What I feel is that the subsidy cannot continue. The external front needs stability, and for that, we will have to let go of these subsidies. And I think sooner than later, the decision will come. And let me assure you that this falling rupee will be stabilized. It will be brought back. And we feel that this external instability will be stabilized. We will have to take tough decisions. There's no doubt about it. It is, I think, it's our job, plus it's the media's job to rationally explain to the public where we are right now, why we are here, and how do we get out from here. So I think in the coming days, the government will be taking steps to ensure stability on the external side. Plus, then we will have to take certain measures
Absolutely.
to.
Ali Saab, I wanted to come towards you. Right now, it is understandable the biggest challenge for the government in terms of economy is that IMF bailout is required at any cost. What could be the hindrance towards it? Why it is getting so hard for the government to do it?
Well, I think first of all, I would like to acknowledge what Rana Saab was saying, and I must say that I'm encouraged by his statement about the about the possible decision of removal of subsidies, which were reduced in February this year. And I think that was the main sort of stumbling block. But even before that, if you look at the budget 21-22, and if you compare it with the previous two budgets of the former government, one can notice that this current budget was expansionary in nature, and they had almost tripled the amount of subsidies and grants in this budget already. And so we were, just to give you a comparison, the subsidies allocated is close to 700 billion rupees. And then you'll have to add the fuel subsidy and then the foregone tax revenues. It will go up to about 1,500 billion rupees of opportunity cost. And, so this is a significant addition over the previous budgets. I think that is where the IMF program was halted. And frankly, I think we need to take ownership of the reforms which we committed with the IMF. What we have done a number of times in our history, that once we commit to these reform programs, we see some stabilization for initial couple of years, and then we detrack. This is exactly what happened this time also,
Right,
and we
Ali
got
Salman Sahab, I
back.
totally get what you're saying, and of course, once a country makes commitments, it should fulfill them. But since my own childhood, one word that we have been buzzword that we have been hearing is macroeconomic stabilization. It seems that every time we actually commit to it, we fail in doing that. Do you think that there is any other way out as well? Perhaps focusing on growth? Because it seems that every time we do it, our bureaucracy, our structural problems are such that we fail to enforce these reforms.
Well, ultimately, we'll have to go for long-term and sustainable growth. But the main question is that what will be the driver of that growth, right? So if you think, and if we all think that, okay, for instance, we can take loans and just invest in infrastructure, for instance, or we can encourage consumption by decreasing the interest rate. Yes, growth will occur in that fashion also, and that is what we have seen episodes of growth which are not sustainable. So, and that's why Prime and Economic Advisory Group has been talking about not just growth but economic transformation, and that needs a fundamental change in how we look at trade and the industrial strategy of this country. That means, increasing the focus on the productivity, increasing the focus on the competition, and on skills development. I think this is where we need to signal clearly. And one more thing I would like to add, that whenever we commit to the IMF program, I think we take the easy route of increasing the tax rates always. And when I remember when Miftah Ismail was finance minister in the last tenure, he committed to, and he actually introduced lowering of taxation tax rates, which were welcomed by the business community. And I think that is the direction where we need to go. I think it will not be easy in front of IMF, but then we need to take away the exemptions. We need to remove the subsidies or minimize the subsidies and grants, and introduce a tax structure which is uniform in nature. I think that will help the growth.
Rana sir, I just want to ask you one thing as well, and we'll talk more about the tax reforms as well, because of course the idea of long-term stabilizing measures for the economy is also important. But when we talk about perhaps the immediate response that is required for the IMF packages or other packages, then of course this means that there will be an increase in prices, and this is of course something that the PMLN perhaps does not want to risk in terms of its voter base as well. Do you think that the kind of impact that is going to have on the perception that people have of the way the government is going to be handling the economy is going to be deeply impacted by this short-term measure? Or do you think that you'll be able to communicate to the people at large as something which was needed and is required for economic growth?
And Rana Sahab, while you are very kind to answer this, let me also ask you, who is the finance minister at this moment? Is it Miftah Ismail or Ishaq Dar? If Ishaq Dar is not the finance minister, why on earth does he have a veto on these matters?
Well, let me assure you, Miftah Ismail Saab is the finance minister, and I'm sure he takes advice from a lot of people, but he is the one to call shots in consensus with the prime minister. And there's always, you can always take advice and discuss issues with many people, but he's the one who's calling the shots.
Advice, yes.
Well,
veto, no.
I don't know of any veto, but let me assure you, you've placed the challenge, Sana. That is the challenge, that
Right.
we have to explain to the people that this is the situation of the country, and there is going to be inflation. But I think once we get the macroeconomic stability, when I think the rupee strengthens, that is going to be an area where we will gain. For example, I can't say for sure, but let's assume once we have the dollars arranged, the rupee could go to 170, and that part would bring relief, in imports becoming cheaper to the Pakistani people. And I think, having a
Imports
two-quarter
becoming cheaper means more imports.
no, but obviously there is also going to be an active effort to reduce imports in whatever way we can. We'll be making sure we'll be going through the import list, and we'll be trying to get rid of, all the extra imports which are not necessities or luxury items. So that exercise is also ongoing right now. So we have to, we have to control what we're importing. We cannot be, and there's going to be an extra effort on making sure that the next agriculture season we're not importing wheat. We'll try, we'll try to be self-sufficient for sugar and other things that we can achieve in a shorter period of time. So all that is going to happen parallel to this exercise. Obviously, the political challenge is huge. And that is why I feel, I would recommend to my government that we should invite PTI for a charter of economy. We should do it now. We have rest of the parties on one side and we have PTI on the other. And at least we should put it across that there are certain things that we should not be doing politics about. And economy is beyond that.
But hang on. You are saying that you are going to invite PTI. Now the question with due respect is the party that when it was in power was not ready to talk to you. It is going to listen to you now that it calls you an illegitimate government, sir.
Well, that is what I'm saying, that we at least have to make that effort and show it to the public how, how attached we are to this effort. So if they refuse, that is their choice. But I think that effort should be made, and I would recommend that to my party. So obviously,
if we talk about the import-export balance, of course, it was disturbed during the COVID-19, and we saw that for last 2 years, probably more than that, the balance was disturbed, and that could be one of the factors. But don't you think that the previous government was very late, or we as Pakistan, we were very late to rehabilitate ourselves in post-COVID era, and still we are struggling to cope with it, and we are still late, and there are certain steps which were should have been taken in the previous government but were not taken, and them steps must be taken at an urgent basis from the current government?
Well, I think my reading is a bit different, at least on the COVID and post-COVID recovery. And, if you recall various international publications, including The Economist, they had viewed very favorably Pakistan's post-COVID recovery and Pakistan's post-COVID normalization. And that is something which I would like to give the previous government due credit. But then, you talk about the import-export balance, and Rana Sahab also mentioned about the possible restrictions or luxury imports. And I think that's where I would like to humbly submit that there is a fallacy which commonly prevails, that we can somehow improve the balance of payment deficit by restricting so-called luxury imports. Whereas the fact is that about 90 to 95% of our imports are non-luxury in nature.
Yes.
And these are fuel related, these are industry related, and raw materials related imports. And so we have to stay committed to the exchange rate, the liberal exchange rate regime which we had adopted in the previous tenure. I think that was a good step forward. And the signaling of the rupee dollar price actually provides the signals for the investors and industrial and consumers to actually rationalize their consumption and investment patterns accordingly. So I would say that
it's important to rationalize all this. But you had a think tank, sir. Let me ask you, has there been a study in this country to actually audit all the SROs? And how many SROs are actually focused on imports and what to do with them? Do we have that kind of studies?
Yes, we have. I mean, there are various studies which are available. Our institute also did a review of the SROs in taxation and tariffs about a year ago. And what we found out that even the previous government was very fond of issuing SROs. They issued about 342 SROs in taxation and tariff regimes, which actually provides a very sort of wrong signals to the business community. So that is what I was saying in the initial remarks, that if we can have a policy which do not discriminate one business sector against another business sector, so no exemptions, but we should treat them as at a uniform level, then I think it will provide the required level of clarity and certainty to the business community. Because what is happening through the SRO culture, that we encourage the business lobbies. Sometimes there are auto sector, sometimes there are sugar sector. These then lobbies come to the government, the Ministry of Finance, to ask for favors and exemptions. I think if Miftah Saab can give this signal through this one budget, which he's hopefully going to present, that will be a huge step forward.
Can you give
there
us
will be no
a total
exemption
number
and
of SROs? The total number. You mentioned 300 and something regarding the previous government, but what exactly is the total number of SROs regarding taxation and these issues?
Well, I do not have the updated number right now, but they could easily be run into hundreds. And that is the sort of the tariff and taxation policy
Faisal,
instrument.
I'll come to you. Rana Saab, when you spoke earlier, you talked about how, of course, when you target something such as not importing wheat, then of course this means that we'll be able to fulfill the demand locally as well, which means, of course, that there are a lot of things that are dependent on agricultural produce as well, such as the conditions, the climate conditions, water supply, and then of course the kind of facilities or technologies you're providing to the farmers, and the kind of areas they can actually work on. But a lot of that, of course, requires perhaps a larger framework or a design in terms of how you're going to actually ensure, if you're going to stop importing an item, that its demand is actually met locally as well. Are there plans, and this is just one thing, but are there plans for the rest of the items that you were talking about earlier, which really do need to be brought in the country in terms of what people need?
Well, yes, agriculture is going to be a focus for the Prime Minister, and self-sufficiency in the areas where we have most of our consumption, be it wheat, sugar, is going to be a priority area. And obviously, we came up with the first water policy. Hakan Abbasi Saab, in his last year, he came up with the water policy for the country. We'll be taking up on that. We'll be, ensuring that we have enough space to storage for water storage is going to be a priority area. We'll try to continue that. And, our focus is going to be on agriculture, because this is an area which is almost 20% of our GDP and employs 50% of the people of Pakistan. So we think this is an area which can give results in the short term as well, and also in the long term.
Right, but what about statements such as from the Minister of Water Resources, who talked about how India, of course, has also stopped water supplies, and it's affecting areas in Sindh, and it's affecting agricultural land elsewhere as well. This is a matter of concern. How are you going to control that?
Well, I think all forums, international, should be utilized in putting up our voice against any violations done by India. That is one way to go about it. And, as much lobbying is required internationally should be done. What is our right should be defended, be it nationally or internationally. That is the way.
Rana Saab, very quickly.
We'll talk more about this, and we'll just take a last question on this segment. Yes, Faisal.
Yeah, Rana Saab, very quickly. Are we confident that once we get IMF, bailout, we will be getting the Saudi package and Chinese rollout?
And very quickly, allow me to add to this as well. You must be listening to what PTI has been saying. I was astonished that your party hasn't used these circumstances to look at what PTI was saying and what it is saying now, and the kind of change. Earlier they were saying that if there's a regime change, everything is going to become hunky-dory, and that's why they were opposing it. And today, when circumstances are different, they are saying that, look, they're incompetent, that's why this is happening. You haven't actually focused on this issue at all.
I mentioned this at one talk show that nothing has been forgiven. Rather, we're stuck in quicksand. So, as they've been pitching that everything will be forgotten and forgiven. So that is not the case. You're right. That should be mentioned. No country is going to give you any funding until they know that you're serious about your fiscal deficits, you're serious about your shortage of dollars, the trade deficits, and your public sector enterprises losses. So, unless you show that you're seriously going to curtail them and that whatever funding that they're giving you or the loans or the, assistance, it is secure. So for that, I think, when we join the IMF program, it is a certification of that seriousness that you show towards a good financial management. And I
Right
believe
now,
once
there is a
that
trust
happens,
deficit.
the whole world would open their doors for any type of assistance that is required to Pakistan.
Right, hopefully. Thank you very much, Mr. Rana and Mr. Ali Salman, for joining us, being a part of the debate.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, that's all we have time for our first segment. But we're going to talk more about what we spoke earlier with reference to water supply in the country as well, which is, of course, extremely important, not just for our livestock and our crops, but then also for our economic growth as well, and for very essential produce such as wheat. This is, of course, something that has affected certain areas of Sindh more vigorously than the rest, but this points towards a larger problem that we're facing, and there have been UN reports which talk about water scarcity in the country by 2025, which is absolutely close. And we also understand that there are problems with India as well, something that the Minister for Water Resources spoke about, and even that has continued for a while, and we really need to be able to sort that out if we want to fix this problem for all. Farrukh, the Minister for Water Resources, did earlier speak about how the crisis is going to be over within a week. But what has happened with reference to India stopping supply or India developing different power projects on the river Indus is something that's not new. I'll take your answer on that, but let me also welcome in the show Mr. Danish Mustafa, who's a professor in critical geography at the King's College London. Thank you very much for joining us and being a part of the show. And we'll take your question first, and then we'll talk about exactly what is required in terms of the kind of efforts that are needed when there is, of course, water scarcity. We have had reports from the UN telling us that this is something that is a matter of concern, and this is something that has affected people, livestock and crops within Pakistan as well. In terms of any immediate measures that can be taken to overcome such a crisis, what really do you think Pakistan can do?
Dr. Zab.
Yes, Dr. Danish.
Trust me.
Yes.
Oh, okay. What can Pakistan do? Well, in the first instance, there has to be water conservation. I think that the crop mix that Pakistan has for agriculture is quite wasteful, quite disastrous. We subsidize production of sugarcane, which is a very high water consuming crop, and there is no need for us to be able to do that. And in fact, we subsidize that in order for it to hog water, which ends up not being available for food crop production and for subsistence farmers. Equally, I think that 80% of the crop water requirements in Pakistan and irrigated areas of Pakistan, according to research, comes from groundwater. And a lot of groundwater that is pumped from tube wells, they are affordable by mostly large farmers, and they do not pay their electricity bills, which also contributes towards your circular debt issue. So one thing that you would have to do in order to conserve water would be to make sure that you get to charge the electricity bills and recover those electricity bills, so that farmers are able to use that water more rationally than the way they are doing it at the moment. So those are the two things that come.
Dr. Saab, since we are talking about Sindh as well, Pakistan is lower riparian when it comes to water consumption, and then in Pakistan, Sindh is lower riparian. Now the question at this moment is, if you have traveled within Sindh, you will see that the crop yields have been destroyed over the years because of scarcity of water. At this moment, do you think that Pakistan, like India, needs a water audit where we actually understand how the water is being used, and then we can have a plan or a program to actually address that?
That is absolutely essential. In fact, one of the tragic comedies of the Pakistani water system is that a lot of water use figures and water flow figures are largely conjectural. A lot of the equations that are used and the formulas that are used, those are empirically derived on most barrages and bridges and infrastructure. And those equations that they use to measure water flow are outdated and they need to be recalibrated. So, surprise, surprise, believe it or not, despite whatever the engineers say, the reality is they have very little idea of how much water is flowing. So I absolutely agree with you that water audit is absolutely essential, that we have to know how much water we have and where is it flowing, because the numbers as they stand at the moment generally just do not make sense. So, but why don't they do it? I mean, the reality is a lot of those water flow measurement equations were essentially derived in South Asia during the colonial times and subsequently. So we have a very long history of devising those water equations. But I think since independence, because of, and I should say in the last 40, 50 years, because of a lot of political reasons and otherwise, there's just simply not been enough of a motivation or reason for people to pay attention to water audits and knowing how much water we have in the first place.
Yeah, Dr. Danish, right now, of course, we have Indus Water Treaty with India, and we have allegations against them as well that they are, diverting the water which is supposed to come towards Pakistan. They are diverting it towards themselves, and our obviously ministers, they are talking about it as well. We know that throughout the world, globally, climate change is a huge talk, and should we be highlighting the same factor at the climate change level, where we can highlight it and we can highlight how India is terrorizing Pakistan with the water shortages and with creating water shortages for Pakistan? Should we do that?
And Dr. Saab, very quickly, can you also talk to or speak to the matter of how much how much wiggle room India has in the Indus Water Treaty? Because every time we actually highlight that they are stealing water, they are diverting water, they come up with some kind of argument that you are not using it, that's why we are just adding spillways. Can you explain that as well?
And also, if you could just add to the fact whether or not such crimes with reference to such resources are even relevant in the international community or given due importance. Are they even prioritized? Are the platforms which are there in terms of any violations actually do something about it? You can take
These
your
are
time.
very loaded questions.
Yeah.
In the first instance, I think the Indus Waters Treaty was a very disadvantageous treaty towards Pakistan. I think my colleagues Majid Akhtar and many others have undertaken research in the World Bank archives, and right in 1956, 57, 58, there were actually cables which are on the record on part of the Pakistani negotiating team that this is a very disadvantageous treaty for Pakistan. But nevertheless, for a whole set of geopolitical and political reasons at the time, the treaty was signed by the Ayub Khan government, where 100% of the flows of the eastern rivers were awarded to India, and 7% of the flows of the western rivers were awarded to India. So that was the treaty. And so the situation that you have in Cholistan is a direct outcome of what happened in the Indus Waters Treaty, where you handed over an entire river to India, which was a very foolhardy kind of a thing to do. But anyway, that was history. That was then. Let's not go there. But then the other question about India stealing water, in the first instance, you have to have some sort of evidence. Where is it stealing water and from what infrastructure is it stealing water? The reality is that on the Indus River, main stem Indus River, it passes very briefly in northern Ladakh between Tibet and Pakistan. Yeah. I am not aware of any structures, nor is anyone else in the world, nor is anyone that I've spoken to in Pakistan. There is some diversion structure within the, and even if they were to divert it, it's like many hundreds of meters below in a deep gorge. Where would they divert it to? I mean, it just simply doesn't make sense. So there is no diversion from the main stem Indus River. Then the question comes about Jhelum River. The Jhelum River emerges in the Kashmir Valley, and it passes through the Uri Gorge and then enters Pakistan. I'm not aware of any infrastructure. I mean, there's local level diversions, of course, which by the Indus Waters Treaty, they are allowed to do so. But in terms of substantive volumetric difference on the Jhelum River to the Pakistani water, I'm not aware of anything, nor is anyone else in the world, and I'd be absolutely love to see any sort of a satellite imagery or any sort of an evidence that you can take to the international community that here they are violating the Indus Waters Treaty there. Now, in case of Chenab, there is a Baglihar Dam, which was, of course, litigated by Pakistan in the early 2000s, which is a hydroelectric power generation project. The thing with hydroelectric power generation projects is that what you're really doing, essentially, is building a waterfall. So unless the water flows, there can be no electricity generation. That's the whole point. It's not an irrigation dam. It is a hydroelectric dam. So with the hydroelectric dams, they're just not capable. They're not designed to make any sort of a substantive difference to the flows of a main stem river. So again, this matter has been litigated at the World Bank level. It has been litigated by the Neutral Observer. It has been litigated many, many ways, and it was resolved in a manner. So the fact is, you lose credibility if you go with all of these alarmist sort of stories to all over the world, and and Pakistanis come across as immature. That either you give them evidence, you say, here is the infrastructure, here's the amount of water that is being diverted from there, here's the modeling that we have done, here's the evidence, do something about it. And if that evidence is there, I am all with you, I'll go with you, everyone will go with you, and the World Bank will be on their case. Because bear in mind, the Indus Waters Treaty is not just between India and Pakistan, it's between India, Pakistan, and the World Bank. So the World Bank is a signatory to it.
Dr. Saab, at the start, when you were talking about Indus Water Treaty, you litigated how it came into effect and how much advantageous it was for Pakistan, or it wasn't.
For
but
India,
with due respect,
even
hang on, sir. Even today, when you listen to Indian government, they keep on threatening that they are going to cancel it. If by virtue of being a lower riparian, if Pakistan had not actually signed it, do you think India still didn't have that kind of control?
You see, again, it's a counterfactual. The treaty was signed. Whether they would have done it or not done it, I don't know, because reality is for the past 60 years, we've had the treaty in place. So whether they would have or would not, I cannot, I don't have a looking bowl where I can say, oh, yeah, they would have done it, they would not have done it. I don't know. So since they have signed it, the reality is India has politicians like we have politicians. And politicians say things which at times are quite irrational. And Indian politicians have been saying it. The entire Indian water bureaucracy will tell you that they would be complete idiots to, in fact, they'd be hacking themselves on the foot to basically get rid of a treaty which has given them the flow of 3 rivers, 100% of the 3 rivers. Name me one water treaty in the world where a country, where a low riparian has signed off the flow of an entire river to another country. Not one. Not one. Because the modern principle of distribution between upper and low riparian is equitable apportionment. Equitable apportionment. There is no equitable apportionment in case of the 3
Absolutely.
Yeah, Dr. Danish,
that's what you signed.
Dr. Danish, you are someone of the field, and of course, we just want to understand from your side that disturbing the flow of a river, is it a crime, sir?
Well, I think morally it is a crime. I think ecologically it is a crime. I think that, ethically it is a crime. But
in terms of consequence, is it a crime? Is there any consequence for us? Is there a platform who's looking after such violations?
Well, I mean, are you talking under international law? No, it is not a crime. Under international law, there is the Helsinki rules whereby you say that between the upper and the lower riparian, there should be equitable apportionment. In case of Pakistan and India, that doesn't apply because we have a treaty in place, an internationally recognized and certified treaty in place. So the only way we can litigate about anything that India does is through the framework of that treaty.
So what does that treaty say about this disturbing the flow?
The treaty has awarded 7% of the water flows to India for local and regional uses of the 3 western rivers, right? So those 7% has never been used by India, by the way. Second thing is that a treaty allows for run-of-the-river hydroelectric power projects within India with the approval of Pakistan. And every hydroelectric power project that I know of on the 3 western rivers were in fact brought up in the Indus Waters Commission, of which Pakistan and India both sit down and the World Bank sits down and they talk about it. At least I'm not aware at the official level of any evidence that has emerged saying that, oh, this particular project violates the treaty. Because if it violates the treaty, then there are very specific mechanisms for Pakistan to take them to task. In case of Baglihar, we had a mechanism. We went to the neutral observer. We went to the international court, and that was litigated and it was decided. And Pakistan and India both accepted that ruling.
Right. Dr. Zab, I'm glad that we are talking about India and Pakistan and Indus Water Treaty, but let us come back to Pakistan's own federal system and the disparities between federating units when it comes to, or structural anomalies when you talk about water distribution, particularly Sindh. How do you propose can this problem be solved? Because every 2 years we hear from one province or the other that there is problem regarding water, that Sindh is not getting the kind of water it needed, or that Punjab is actually according its own water to Sindh just to actually woo it or win it over.
Dekhiye, I think that the 1991 accord, Indus Waters Accord between the Interprovincial Water Accord, was very poorly negotiated. It is dependent upon a 10-day running average flows of the river to different riparians. Now, the reality is that the Sindh sowing season is a month ahead of Punjab.
Yeah.
And the problem arises when that water does not become available to Sindh at the time that they need it. That's when they start complaining, and that's when the problem arises. Now, Punjab turns around and says, well, look here, over the month or over 2 months, on average, we have delivered. Well, you have delivered, of course, obviously you've delivered. But then, and especially when you add in the flood season flows, the average evens out over the year. So they say, looky here, we gave you all the water that you wanted. But the water does not become available to Sindh at the time that it is needed. That's the issue. Now, from what I understand, when it comes to the Indus, I think it's an Indus River System Authority, where you have representatives from all four provinces within that authority. There is very little, how shall I put it, culture, if you will, of cooperative, negotiated distribution of water and accommodation. It is always an antagonistic kind of a relationship. If Punjab says one thing, then other couple of provinces go against it. If the other provinces say something, Punjab and KP or whatever go against it. So it's invariably by voting. And I think that there is evidence, and I pointed it out in my book, based upon interviews and many other places, that there is in fact evidence that oftentimes Sindh's protestations about the timing of water, the time at which they need the water, often does not get attended to at the relevant time. So even if the IRSA says, okay, fine, release the water, the gap, the lag time between water releases from Mangla and Terbela and for it to reach Sindh, by that time it reaches Sindh, the problem has worsened. There is no mechanism for it to immediately.
And that should be improved. Dr. Saab, very quickly regarding alluvial erosion when it comes to the sea. We keep on hearing that in order to ensure that there is no cutting of this sort, Pakistan has to release a certain amount of water into the sea so that there is no pushback. Do you think that there should be some legal mechanism to ensure that as well? And regarding the 2 dams that we are building right now, do you think that at this moment they are going to provide some kind of solution?
Dams don't provide the solution. They're a very expensive way of going about it. And reality is that you had the Indus River water system operating without dams prior to 1967 when you built the first dam, Mangla Dam, and 1976 when you built the Terbela Dam. And according to calculations done by some of my colleagues, turns out that about 2% of the work, top water requirement, surface water requirement, in fact, is made available through the dams. So there is very little evidence to suggest that dams, in fact, will solve anything. But that said, I think that the legal mechanisms are already there, and they're very inadequate and very foolishly negotiated kind of mechanisms. For example, it says that on average, annually 35 million acre feet of water should be passed below Kotri to the delta. If you actually look at the numbers, turns out that typically 1 year on average there'd be 5 million acre feet, another year there'd be 2 million acre feet, the third year there'd be 6 million acre feet, and in a flood year it turns out that 60 million acre feet go through.
Right.
Now, if you take an average of those 5 years, turns out it's 35 million. So Punjab says we're okay, we're all fine. But river systems don't work like that. You can't
Absolutely,
say
that's a
on
valid point. Unfortunately, we're out of time, Dr. Danish. We have much more to learn from you and talk about, but we're really out of time and we'll have to conclude here. But this, of course, is an important crisis, and thank you for pointing out a lot of
Thank
things
you
that
very
need to be
much.
done and the measures that need to be taken for us to actually be able to resolve this problem once and for all. Thanks a lot for watching the debate. We'll see you now on Monday.